Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I am going to be talking about Debris Season 1, Episode 12. It's called A Message from Ground Control. So full spoilers for the episode as always. And now, every time I say this, it ends up being completely untrue. But I feel like this is going to be a shorter discussion, or not a discussion, it's just me, but a shorter review than maybe we've had for the last few. Maybe I'll be wrong, but not because there's anything wrong with the episode. It's a very solid episode. I think it is very neat how it uses all the elements that we've been. I mean, not that the pieces of debris that are popping up in this episode are exactly the ones that we've encountered in the previous episodes, but the idea that the collection of debris in all these cases at the orbital warehouse is starting to do stuff, right? That's the premise of the episode, is that one shoots through a guy's head, which is a wonderful moment. It was like a gunshot going through a head. But like a sniper's gunshot, like you're going through multiple cases, through the head, then through the wall. Seems to reconnect to the ship. Nothing else does though, because then, of course, once they come in to investigate, they've evacuated the building. We then get some of the affected technicians inside are kind of walking around like zombies, doing the bidding of the debris effectively, and lining up the boxes, the cases, so that they can be shot into a pocket dimension. It's like a portal, and then they get spat out almost instantly with just the case, where it's just kind of destroyed and whatever was inside, whatever piece of debris was inside the case has been kept. And my first thought, of course, is Influx up doing this somehow from somewhere else. Of course, as the episode goes on, it became clear that this was not the case. This is the debris itself, and whatever operating system or sentient life form or whatever it is that's controlling the debris. The debris itself might be sentient. Who knows? But it's doing something. It's getting all these pieces and it's building something. That is the premise. And ultimately, we come out at the end with the ball of light that we've heard teased. Is that this episode's about them taking a leap of faith and letting whatever this is finish what it's doing. Because, there are deaths. The guy at the start does unceremoniously get his head blown off. And then later on, a couple of the zombie-like technicians, essentially have seizures and die. And it's not until Brian has this emotional moment where the debris manifests the woman from last episode and basically completes the union, completes the handshake that we were about to get during the memories last week. And it cuts away as he does this, but then he comes to Finola and explains that he feels what they have to do. He understands on some level that they have to let this thing finish what it's doing, and that delaying it or trying to get in its way, which a lot of the episode. And this is why I think this will be a shorter conversation, because a lot of the episode is just them trying to get in the way of this, whether that be to reverse the polarity, as George suggests at one point, or literally just trying to move the boxes away from where they are, which turns one of the orbital agents into another mainless zombie. It's basically that, or reacting, and there's some good creepy imagery. And when they first came in, and some of the technicians are just lined up facing a wall, it's kind of creepy. It's all very eerie, and it's all very kind of spooky, but in a cerebral sci-fi kind of way. Like there's forces that we can't quite understand yet, but it all boils down to this leap of faith. It boils down to Brian saying, we have to let this finish. You're the one who has the faith. You're the one who believes in things. You're the one who said debris could change the world. You're the one who's hopeful. You're all these things. Well, for the first time, I genuinely believe. I believe in this. I'm asking you to take this leap of faith with me. And they do. They let the rest of the debris go through without any incident. And it seems like no one else dies because of this. It was the stalling and trying to get in the way, which involved holding them back. It involved trying to hold them down, because they took them all out to like hospital beds and tried to analyze them and whatnot. And there's a moment where it's Brian who makes the call to just let them go, because ultimately all they're doing is struggling, and it's causing more stress. And I think partly just wants to see what they do as well. So that's the big thing. And it's this beautiful scene. The music's beautiful when this ball of light appears out of the little pocket dimension, and then flies outside, and everyone who's there, Maddox included, sees this thing, and they're all kind of in awe, and then it flies away. I mean, the most obvious guess, I think, at this point would be to suggest that it's probably a beacon, going back to wherever the ship came from. You know, whoever built it, or others like it, perhaps, if it is just a sentient thing in and of itself. I think that's super interesting, of course, and even the ending. You know, the chatter of from the first contact. They're saying Brian keeps repeating the phrase. I think it was telesphere, and this is a sphere of light, and you know, tele typically, you know, is about communication. So I do wonder if this thing built a message back home. And it's interesting that it decided to do this once it, you know, has a better understanding of human beings. Brian says that it was trying to figure out why he has a desire to protect others, which is a very noble and heartwarming thing for an alien entity to want to understand. Like, if that's something, if there's anything to take from human beings, perhaps that's one of the better things you can take, because there's a lot of bad things you can take from human beings. I think we might get into that, but you know, I think that's all solid stuff. It all plays into the themes of what we've been doing. Some obviously other things going on in the episode. We do have the discovery of the sort of sub level in the orbital warehouse where they've been doing weaponization, which, I mean, this doesn't come as a surprise. I don't know if anyone watching this didn't think for a second that Maddox and Orbital were weaponizing the debris, or were turning it into weapon systems. And the implication was always that the other countries were doing this, that Russia and China were doing this, which is exactly what Maddox says to Finola. And don't get me wrong, I get why the characters are reacting to it. I don't necessarily think there's I don't think she's surprised necessarily. Brian says he's not surprised. Like, I think deep down they knew this was a possibility. They're not idiots, but they're still, you know, they're still hit with it, and she's hit with the fact that Georgie's own work has been used to do this, which is exactly what Influx was doing with Georgie's work. And George is trying to speculate why why Maddox wants him dead early in the episode. I did like the small beat where she brings him clothes and says it's more for them than him, which humbly shuts him up and he just accepts him. But, you know, poor George, he's sitting there in his tinfoil, or whatever you call it. What do you call tinfoil again? I can't remember. Whatever Americans call tinfoil. He's sitting in tinfoil, and he's obviously in awe as well when he hears about what's going on. But when he's asked earlier in the episode about why Maddox may want him dead, he doesn't really have an answer. He speculates that it's, you know, he represents something that, you know, Maddox wants control, and maybe that is to do with that. The scene kind of plays out more of a kind of an understanding between George and Finola about what Orbital is, the potential motives behind Orbital, who can be trusted there. And it is reassuring to hear Finola say, no, she believes in Brian, she does trust Brian, but Orbital as a whole, it's feeling a bit more sketchy. And then later in the episode, when they discover the weaponization lab, it's like, well, yeah, well, her worries are justified, and her big, you know, dramatic scene with Maddox and yelling at him, obviously having to hold back that her father's alive, that she knows where he is, and all the rest of it. But Maddox, of course, his side of this is kind of interesting, because he's looking up at this orbital light. He's kind of in awe, even though we obviously are a lot more hesitant with him, I think, as the audience, because he has been kind of untrustworthy. He's up to something. And the end of this episode, and this is the penultimate episode of the season, does leave a lot of threads dangling into the next one. One of which is that I keep saying Brian instead of Maddox, is that Maddox's deal with the Russian woman, I think she's Russian, for this piece of debris, very important. But that was teased, that was set up all the way back in like episode 3 or 4, something like that. Like, they set this up ages ago, and now we're finally getting to it in the finale. So that's still going on, and he looks very emotional when he realizes that he's about to get it. You know, there's a moment here which makes me still think it's to do with his son. You know, and I think the whole scene with George and Finola talking about Maddox needing to control things, and they sort of talk about it in a larger context of government bodies wanting to control things, but they talk about Maddox wanting to control things, and so much of his plot this season, well, it's not been the highlight by any means. Thematically, it does work here because it's all been about control. He's losing control of his family life, of his home life, of his son, of his wife, and he's grasping to keep it all together. And this piece of debris, for better or worse, and probably worse, is probably to do with trying to fix that and trying to control that. So I think it's the temptations of playing God in some way, even if it's not the literal creation of life per se. Which, and obviously the other big thread is that Ash does break out of prison. We get a sequence of him killing the guard, grabbing the doctor. He's got seemingly debris inside of his body, and he activates it and teleports by using a couple of defibrillators on himself. And that's basically it. The key detail, of course, is that they're aware that George has found the piece, right? The piece of debris that they're looking for. George is at this kind of station with all these antennas and radio towers. He's using that to find things and boost signals and whatnot. And he does find this by the end of the episode, but Influx know he's found it. And we also hear from George that he remembers what it is that it's a piece of debris that will basically map out where every other piece of debris is. It will show them where to get everything else. And because he said that in the opening 10 minutes, I think that's why I was thinking maybe Influx has already found it, and this is why they're starting to teleport pieces of debris out of the warehouse. Obviously, again, it wasn't them. This was something natural coming from the debris itself, which is, very beautiful when it ultimately happens. People did die along the way, even before people, before Finola and Brian and the others started to interfere. There was at least that one death at the start, which should not be ignored. Some innocent person did get their brain splatted over this. But it feels like non-malicious. It feels like he was just in the way. He was standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what it really feels like in the context of this entity that is trying to understand us. And maybe if it understood us enough, maybe it would have checked to see if there was any innocent bystanders before it started beaming things around. But yeah, I mean, most of the episode is atmosphere. Most of it's the mystery of what's going on, trying to figure out, the portal. If anything, I think this is a good episode. I like a lot of the things that it sets up. I love the ending with the Orbital light. If I have a critique about it, it's probably just that it doesn't feel as special as I think it on paper it seems like it would, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's because a lot of the plot is just, so much of the show is them sort of reacting to what the debris is doing and trying to figure out. That's been kind of a staple throughout the show, and a lot of it's been very good. I don't know if it's because what's happening here, other than what's it building in the pocket dimension, it was mostly just, debris flying into a pocket dimension, which is something we've already established earlier in the season. So I don't know if the mystery was less intriguing up front, perhaps, or if making people walk around like zombies just is inherently less interesting or cool than a lot of the other things the show has done. That's to say there's a problem with any of it, because there isn't. Everything that this episode sets up by the end is super exciting, and I'm really looking forward to the finale. So I I'm looking forward to maybe more in-depth discussion about what Brian experienced. Maybe that's something Finola and Brian will talk about more next episode. And I think their dynamics together and their trying to the way they're kind of adding to each other's lives, and the way Finola's optimism and hope is extending to him, and maybe even how some of his more tactical style is going back on her, but how they are continually adapting and evolving and reacting to the debris, because ultimately what they're doing for each other is, I think, kind of a microcosm of what the debris and humanity are going to do to each other. Because one of the things that I never talked about last week when we spoke about the debris itself is trying to figure humans out, I never really went into a conversation about, well, is this debris, is it ultimately going to be a force for good? Is it going to be malicious? Or is it going to be completely neutral? Or a mix of any of those three? Where is it going to land on? Is it ultimately a good thing that wants to help humanity? Is some of the show going to be about convincing it that humanity is worth saving? That's a common theme in science fiction. like all the possibilities there, and I really don't know. Obviously, the tone of the show feels very hopeful, and it feels like the characters are going to at least some point be rewarded for faith and hope. So that would imply that, you know, it's at least neutral and what some good will come of it eventually. You know, assuming the show doesn't get cancelled, which I might very well do, and I'll be really upset when that happens. But I was thinking about it again here at the end of the episode, because it feels hopeful when it flies off. But I mean, for all we know, it could be coming back with a fleet of ships to take over Earth, and all these puny humans that clearly aren't worth keeping around because we're all awful or something. So yeah, so we ended the cliffhanger of Ash knowing that George has found the piece. So all these threads are coming together. It would not shock me if George does actually, you know, die for good next episode. I don't want him to, but it would not surprise me. Given there, you know, like he is this kind of a crutch where Finola calls him, and he kind of figures things out and says, "La-di-da, you know, these numbers aren't random. It's a sequence. They're fractions or something." He says in this episode, you know, during the technical gobbledygook, and you know, maybe it would be a challenge for the writing to take him off the board. And you know, we're already talking about his legacy and what his work's been used for. Like that could very easily extend to him post death. Like it really could, in a lot of ways. And maybe that's how you hurt Finola's hope. You take her father from her, and you know that's something that can set her back. And maybe and if there is hopefully a season 2 of some kind, you know, Peacock, do your thing, come in and save it from the network. Make the right choice, Universal. But if they do that, then maybe we get a flip dynamic next season where Brian's the hopeful one because he's seen the light, literally, in a way. And Finola is maybe the one who is more jaded, the one who is more cynical because of what Orbital's done with their father's work, because of maybe how her father ends up if he does indeed perish next episode. And we could have a different dynamic. That could be interesting if they want to go down that path. So, possibilities. So, that's good. So there you go. That's the penultimate episode. Like I said, it is a bit shorter. I kind of felt it as I was, like, you know, getting towards the end of the episode. I didn't think there was going to be as much of the plot itself to dissect, as in the same way that I normally would. A lot of it's theorizing about what's going on, which ultimately is harder to talk about after the episode because I know, you know, where it goes, what the answer is. And maybe that's the biggest critique of the episode in a lot of ways, is that sometimes those are still fun to talk about because all the steps to get to the answer are riveting on their own. And maybe in this case, some of the theories and whatnot were just kind of like the stopgaps to getting to it at the end of the episode, as opposed to actually being a journey of discovery. Maybe it was more gobbledygook sounding this episode, so therefore it was less engaging on its own right. But still a lot of atmosphere, great stuff at the end. Excited for the finale. And hopefully it's not the series finale and it's just the season finale. Maybe the best hope we have at this point is Universal saying that they'll do a 10 episode season 2 on Peacock as opposed to doing another season on network TV. Here's hoping. It doesn't feel optimistic right now, but we should be like Finola and have some faith. Have some hope, damn it. Have some hope. But that is Debris, episode 12. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the channel and everything we do here, like and subscribing is the free way of doing it. And by all means, you kind of, I think if you're just a viewer on YouTube, you underestimate how much all that crap actually helps channels grow and find more of an audience. But you can also support us financially over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv for as little as $1 per month. So go have a look and see if you want to do that. But otherwise, yeah, get us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?